I start today with 3 photographs on unemployment in America. The first was taken 50 years ago, in the decade of the 60s. Few here were of working age then, but few do not recall this decade of one of political upheaval and social unrest. Yet in fact, it was the most productive decade in American history. Manufacturing and technology flowed to and from the United States. Good jobs were secure and plentiful, and the average annual rate of unemployment of 4.7% fell below the full employment level of 5%. It was a decade when a college student like me could write home to his parents about his dreams for a career. It begins with my work, with what I can do for myself and the world, for the purpose of fulfilling a life. And when parents like mine could respond, now that you've finally learned how to write, go out and get a high-paying job with a future. You can tell this was a long time ago because people communicated by mail in the nation's official language, English. Today they communicate electronically in the nation's official language, texting. The second photograph was taken today. 24 million people are unemployed or underemployed. The Bureau of Labor Statistics puts the average unemployment rate alone at 8.34% for the past 5 years, a rate 79% higher than that in the 60s. 4 million people still in the labor force today have been out of work for over a year, compared to only 700,000 in October of 2007. The numbers represent real American people, good, useful people with broken spirit, shamed, humiliated, and depressed. Asking for handouts with inability to provide, more adult children are forced to live with their parents because the unemployment rate of those under 25 is twice that of the national average. 4.5 million people have dropped out of the labor force since 2007. 500,000 were recorded last month. 2 million more people received disability benefits than in 2007, a sign of desperation when their unemployment benefits run out. Professional jobs like teaching decline, while retail salesperson positions grow. The undeniable conclusion: America cannot create enough jobs for those who want and need to work. The third photograph captures those concerned about the future of our country. Our work skill level is falling behind that of other countries. For example, China graduates more engineers. Our physical infrastructure is eroding, and our electronic, or cyber, infrastructure is under siege. We face a national tragedy that has not improved in 5 years. We need another approach, an approach that applies the education principles that IIT inculcates best: imagination, think big thoughts without limit, exponentialism, expand the worthwhile at a rapid pace. An approach that provides a meaningful, remunerative job for citizens in the near term. An approach that creates the conditions that allow our most talented and hardest working to propel the skill level of our workforce toward leadership. There are 5 interrelated steps that will take us rapidly down the path to full employment. Jobs for the unemployed, the new jobs, upgrade essential national skills, repair and advance our infrastructure, and fund full employment. Step 1, the best way to put everybody to work is simply to put everybody to work. There are 2 sure ways. First, universal mandatory service for those unemployed between the ages of 16 and 34 for 2 years with meaningful work in fields of their interest and inclination, jobs with a future, with vocational and educational training, where performance is measured and rewarded. Universal service would employ 7.3 million people, or half of the unemployed, with some excluded, who can get jobs independently, have already served in the military, are finishing high school or privately paid higher education. The second way is give a job in exchange for benefits. This covers the remaining 7.5 million unemployed. The same program as universal service, except voluntarily. No work, no benefit. 1 year for this program with 2 one-year options. The emphasis here is on vocational training and job placement. Now, these programs could be administered through the current federal and state unemployment compensation apparatus, which spends about $5 billion a year to determine whether the unemployed are qualified for benefits and whether those with benefits are looking for a job. The same organization can be used to determine that the same people actually have a job. Over 14.8 million unemployed can be paid the same wages, same medical insurance, food stamps, and other benefits at the same level now available from the state federal unemployment compensation program. The second step deals with the new paid jobs. Let's look first at the process of job creation. Higher output in the private sector does not necessarily result in higher employment, often lower. Look inside each business. Top management is not responsible for solving the national employment crisis. Rather, they're required to maximize profits of their own company, usually short term, and there's a good reason. A high and growing profit maximizes top management's compensation, and that's the real incentive. And the most usual method to raise output with fewer people is to raise output with fewer people. And the opportunity to do so has accelerated in recent years by replacing people with technology and automation, outsourcing labor to lower labor cost countries, and applying management science. A typical example, Bill Newlands, president of Beam International North America, told the Harvard Business School Club last week that he increased Beam sales 14%, adding, and I quote, very few people. The largest corporations and banks carry nearly $4 trillion of cash on their balance sheets. If they used only 5% of that to create new jobs, 7 million new jobs would be created. They don't do it. We therefore need to create jobs that don't now exist and that prepare our unemployed to handle needs that soon will exist. Here are 8 fields where this can be accomplished in large numbers. Go to school, especially vocational. Teach and assist at schools. The environmental field. Computer operations and service. Recycling, including mining, landfills. Military, elderly work corps, and healthcare. And here are a few examples of possible exponential employment growth opportunities through use of our imagination. 300,000 plus teachers have been laid off during the Great Recession. Let's rehire them and many more. And not only let's rehire the teachers and many more, but with assistance. They become much more effective that way. Plant the billion trees we need to properly absorb the carbon dioxide and build topsoil in our country. Match many of the 18 million citizens over 75 years old with the 20 million under 5 years old for supervision, education, and transfer of life skills, also freeing up their parents for work. Match the 6 million people unemployed and underemployed with high school education or less, largely in the inner city, with discipline, training, and education, vocational competence, and social skills leading to jobs, and operate this by the military. The military has an excellent proven record of training people on a large-scale basis. President Obama encourages vocational training programs in high schools. Even I started one at Innovations Charter School in Chicago this year. This is a proven approach. The Works Progress Administration, WPA, at its peak employed 3 million Americans, or about 10% of the workforce in the last depression. Paul Krugman reminds us in his book, End This Depression Now, this is equivalent to 13 million people today. We used to have compulsory 2-year military service, or equivalent, for all American males. I served in the 1960s. The third step, upgrade our essential national skills. Putting the country's citizens and residents to work at high technical levels in fields essential to building national growth and security is the greatest single investment our country can make. Today, we need to rapidly raise our skill disciplines in 2 broad areas. The first is the STEM disciplines, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And this is exactly what is taught at IIT. And secondly, to raise the skill levels in other advanced fields, teaching, medicine, and what I call cybersanity. Those qualified to make the personal investment to do so can receive an interest-free government loan for study and training, a loan that is forgiven proportionally over 20 years for work in those fields. Alternatively, companies who provide advanced training and application can receive tax credits applied to finance those doing such work. For example, Lockheed Martin engineers are creating a water filter system that can turn salt water into fresh water much cheaper than the traditional method, reverse osmosis. And finally, we provide non-US citizens, many who are here, the best higher education in the world, but we make it very difficult for them to work in the United States for more than a year, and very few stay longer. Does America become stronger when it limits its pool of world leadership skills? As of 2009, the last survey, some 260,000 foreign students, graduate and undergraduate, were working toward STEM degrees at universities in the United States. This is not just a backyard pool. It is a venerable lake. Fourth step, repair and advance our infrastructure. Knowledge and its application is the single most valuable input to economic development today. It exceeds labor, capital, and finance in value. Infrastructure improvement, physical and informational, therefore depends more on applied knowledge than on other inputs. To upgrade our physical infrastructure, we can privatize at profit roads, bridges, airports, government buildings. This is done in most other countries in the world. It requires the type of advanced financial intelligence, structuring, and management taught here at the IIT Stewart School of Business. You need to identify the project, how to privately finance it, and then build it. The railroads spend $12 billion a year privately on rail infrastructure, for example. We must also correct severe informational structural breakdowns. Today's worst is cyber communication. There's an urgent need to, 1, assure privacy, and 2, eliminate all forms of cyber warfare. Who will endow an IIT School of Advanced Cybernetics dedicated to meeting these objectives? Who will and should attend? From what countries? How can it exponentially improve the safety of the world? And just as important, the cash flow at IIT. Finally, let's look at funding for full employment. The new costs, I calculate, are about $500 billion a year. And here's my breakdown. For universal national service and for the unemployed to get a job in order to get benefits is about $150 billion additional each. Loan forgiveness tax credits for those getting advanced training, about $15 billion. And administration, infrastructure, waste, and corruption, which inevitably comes with these programs, about $150 billion a year, total about $500 billion. The new funds can exceed $600 billion annually with little additional direct federal spending in 5 different ways. First, our old friend, quantitative easing. The Federal Reserve can buy new state employment bonds with the interest returned to the states, as they're doing now with the Treasury bonds, no cash drain, and they can substitute part or all of its current purchase of Treasury and mortgage bonds. The Fed has saved our banks in this way. Let it now save our citizens in the same way. 2, tax the $11.3 trillion of pension funds at 1%. This can be largely offset by bringing management fees of these funds, which are high, down to market. This was suggested by Dean Baker in his treatise, End of Loser Liberalism. Charge 0.5% on the purchase side of speculative securities, stocks, bonds, and derivatives, another Dean Baker suggestion. Continue the base level of state and federal employment taxes, and let me sum these for you. Quantitative easing, if we use the current program, is anywhere from $250 billion to $1 trillion a year. Tax on the pension funds, 110 billion. The tax on speculative security purchase, 150 billion. The continuing level of federal employment, 100 billion, which totals somewhere over 600 billion. Now, there are 2 other sources which can't be determined at this time, but are certainly very possible. The first is my favorite, balance the federal budget. Warren Buffett suggests that if the deficit exceeds 3%, incumbents can't stand for re-election. My own suggestion is when the budget is in deficit in any year, no elected official gets paid. And finally, the social costs, police, prison, security, and so on, automatically go down with full employment. If people are employed and have something to do, they have less time for crime. So in conclusion, if the country wants full employment, as it must, the cost is more than affordable today. As the country moves toward full employment, the costs go down, so the sources can be sunsetted. And like every good government program, when the objectives are sustained, the government will, of course, quietly fade away. Let's finally return to where we started, an employment environment where young women and men can text their parents, even in the worst of times, when I seek a fulfilling job, opportunity and hope abound. Life may carry me another 80 years and a few more, but my work and its impact will live forever. Let this dream come true.